America and Alabama at the crossroads. Can we make Alabama better? I am Ralph Cook, a retired Alabama Supreme Court Justice and a lawyer in the Hare, Wynn, Newell, and Newton law firm in Birmingham, Alabama. This discussion grows out of police shootings of unarmed black men in America and the demonstrations calling for change across the country. Not since the 60s have we seen the call for change on a scale that we have witnessed in recent weeks and days. These demonstrations, however, are different from the 60s in that they involve large numbers of black and white Americans from all around the country. Polls show that 7 out of 10 Americans approve of the demonstrations. And in Alabama, we have seen a majority white demonstration in a mostly white suburb of Birmingham. I hope this discussion can get you to think about what is occurring, why it is occurring, and what you can do as lawyers and citizens to put our country and state on a different track. My grandnephew, a 2020 graduate of Howard University, has written an editorial essay titled, "If I'm Next," in which he describes America as he and members of his generation see it, his fears and trepidations of being black in America, and his hope for the future. My grandson and my grandnephew are the same age. Both are college graduates. My grandson finished Morehouse College in May. Both have taken jobs in New York City and are planning to be roommates when their jobs begin in the fall. Both are apprehensive regarding police interaction, and as my grandnephew stated, scared to be a black man in America. I have given both my son and my grandson what is referred to in the black community as the talk. That is, how they should react in dealing with the police. After the recent shootings, we again, including my granddaughters, had the talk. The talk explains that if you have a police interaction, whatever the police ask you, to respond politely, to remove ambiguity, yes sir, no sir. Keep your hands in sight, no quick movement. If the police are 100% in error, don't challenge him or her. They are the judge and jury on the street, but not so in the courtroom. It does not matter how it makes you feel. The important thing is to remain alive. That discussion, regardless of your station in life, occurs in the homes of millions of black Americans. It was no different in my generation. My parents had to talk with my brother, sister, and me. I was told essentially the same thing I have told my children and grandchildren. I have been told by one of my white friends that grew up in Birmingham that his father had a similar talk with him. However, there is one big difference. Police interaction is more of a reality for more black people. You have heard it said, and it is true as the sun will rise tomorrow. There is systemic racism in this country, and I will explain what I mean by that. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar recently said in a Los Angeles Times op-ed that racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, until you let the sun in, and then you see it's everywhere. As long as we keep shining that light, we have a chance of cleaning it wherever it lands. But we have to stay vigilant because it's always in the air." End quote. A June 10th Washington Post editorial by Ratley Balco stated that there is overwhelming evidence that the criminal justice system is racist, and that we have institutions and systems that produce racially disparate outcomes regardless of the intentions of the people who work within them. Meaning that you don't have to declare a system racist by branding those who participate in it as intentionally engaging in prejudice. Balco goes on to list all of the evidence, statistics, and studies that establishes systemic racism in the criminal justice system. If you have an interest in reading the editorial, it should be available on the Washington Post website. So how did we get to where we are in Alabama? I can say without fear of contradiction that racism was intentional and purposeful. Let's look at 400 years of evidence in 60 seconds. It began with slavery, where the system of white supremacy was implemented. Black codes were passed following slavery as an example, forbidding black people from being able to learn to read and write. The U.S. Supreme Court in Dred Scott in 1857 said that black men had no rights that white men had to respect. And then there were Jim Crow laws that legalized segregation. And then U.S. Supreme Court in Plessy versus Ferguson's 1896 established separate but equal. Then there was the convict leasing system, where poor blacks were arrested and convicted mostly for vagrancy, but for any crime, and leased out to big farms and corporations. It was also called slavery by another name, and there's a book to that effect. And then there were voter restrictions, literacy tax, poll taxes, gerrymandering, and the grandfather clause. And then we had poor education funding, and vigilantism, where the Klan and other violent groups sought to impose white supremacy, including beatings and lynchings. And then there's the opening speech of John B. Knox, president of the 1901 Constitutional Convention in Alabama, on May 12, 1901, where he leaves no ambiguity that white supremacy was being established in the state. If you haven't read it, I invite you to do so. Lastly, the deliberate teaching of the white majority of racial superiority to justify systemic racism and hatred. But you may say, we live in a country of laws and not of men. We have a national and a state constitution that guarantees equal and inalienable rights. We have courts to protect the rights of people. Given our time limitations, let me say just a couple of things. One, the rights of black Americans were not protected in the United States Constitution until passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments after the Civil War. And of course, the purpose of the Alabama Constitution has been established. The courts have not historically been a place for refuge to consistently protect the rights of black Americans. It has improved, but like society, has significant room for improvement. As an example, on June 12th of this year, United States Circuit Judge James Wynn on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals wrote in a Washington Post editorial titled Injustices in the Courts, commenting on the U.S. Supreme Court's precedent of qualified immunity, which shields police from civil lawsuits alleging excessive force. This court precedent also subverts the Civil Rights Act of 1871, which was passed to protect newly freed slaves and provide relief in federal court for conduct in violation of a constitutional right under color of law. United States Supreme Court precedent provides that a plaintiff has the burden of showing a violation of his or her constitutional rights are clearly established, which means that a previous federal court must have determined that a fairly identical claim to plaintiffs was a clearly established right. That is somewhat difficult to do when Supreme Court precedent has allowed and encouraged cases to be dismissed when they do not violate a clearly established right without any consideration of whether the conduct violates the Constitution. Just last month, the Supreme Court denied cert in several qualified immunity cases. Now, I have packed quite a bit into these few minutes, but the most important part of this is, what do you do to make Alabama better? Or what can you do to make Alabama better? Firstly, you can learn about the culture and history of your fellow Alabamians. I had a white friend tell me that most black people have a PhD in the culture of white people, while most white people don't have a GED in the culture of black people. Read a book or writings on African American history throughout the year, or during the summer, and or during Black History Month in February. I have done the same for the past 40 to 50 years, and still learning. You may not be where you want to be in 5 years, but you will have learned a lot. When you come to Montgomery, or when you go to Montgomery, go to the Equal Justice Memorial and learn about lynching in Alabama. When you come to Birmingham, go to the Civil Rights Institute. Knowledge is a powerful thing. It moves you from darkness into the light. Don't shy away from discussing race or race issues with an open mind. It will make you more knowledgeable. We have to reach a point of racial reconciliation in our state and in our country. It may not require a Truth and Reconciliation Commission as was done in South Africa, but it does require that we acknowledge our truths and grow from them. I recently read a book summary on editorial that most white people are uncomfortable talking about race. If that's the case, you are in a good place. Acknowledge it and move forward. Have a voice for those things that you know are wrong. Most of you are part of the majority in this state and country. You are part of a prestigious profession. Your voice carries a lot of weight. Use it. For those things you can't change, you may be able to insert some moderation. Oftentimes, when I was on the Supreme Court, there were some things I couldn't change, but I could offer an alternate point of view, or in some cases, some moderation. Things are not going to change unless the majority demand change. So many of us, even though we have professional or work interactions with members of other races, we really don't know each other. For the last 19 years, I have been part of an interracial lunch group. We talk politics, race, football, or any subjects of the day. We don't miss meeting. During COVID-19, we have moved to a weekly Zoom meeting. I think it helps your understanding. If you have a situation where you can do the same, do it. I have not commented on politics in Alabama. I'm simply going to say that if we want our state to get better, we must exercise more scrutiny in electing our leaders. For too long, race has dominated or been a part of our politics, either directly or in cleverly disguised words and or cleverly disguised policies and actions. It is time for that to change. This will not be easy. It will require speaking to the soul of the hearts and minds of people of goodwill. It is not likely that we will ever become colorblind as Lady Liberty depicts, though it is a noble goal. We can, however, grow beyond fear and into understanding.